Welcome to the Dialogue KE. Tonight, we'll be discussing on the state of politics in the country. And to help us dissect this matter, I'm joined by TGN Party Leader Muthiora Karriara. Karibu sana.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kennedy.
All right, and Esther Nyonja, political analyst.
Hi, Kennedy.
They say ladies first, but men before. Let me begin with you, Muthiora. We've actually seen the statements by the Azimio leader Raila Odinga saying that he's going to back Kalonzo Musyoka for the 2027 presidency.
Yes.
But actually today, they released a statement saying that the remarks were actually were not read in the right context.
Yes.
I don't know what you have to say about that. Are we seeing the 2027 election campaign already starting?
Well, the backtracking by Raila Odinga, of course, was expected. For those who have been watching the way he carries himself, there's no way he was going to endorse someone this early in the game. What Raila Odinga was doing with regard to Kalonzo Musyoka's stature was trying to manage what the president had initiated. The president, in a way, wanted to dim Raila Odinga's chances of running in 2027 by forcing them to a corner where they will have to front Kalonzo Musyoka. So Raila Odinga came out to read to Kenyans what Kenyans already know, the credentials of Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. But then, of course, I will say, it was put out of context. It's not that he was excited that he ended up saying everything that he said, but knowing Raila Odinga, he's not the kind of a person who would endorse someone unless there was a gun to his head like it happened in 2002.
Do you think it's the right time for the Azimio leader, Raila Odinga, to endorse Kalonzo for the 2027?
Thank you for inviting me to this show today, Kennedy.
With
the statement that happened at Oburu's birthday yesterday. He was turning 80 years, and the statement was said by Raila Odinga. I tend to believe that when someone is on that stage, you could be carried away by excitement. And because Kalonzo was there, Kalonzo is leading the he's the leader of Azimio in the National Dialogue Committee,
Yeah.
And he was there. I feel that was quite strategic because first, if you look at it, it was in Nyanza, where that is Raila's stronghold. And looking at the man Raila, who is very unpredictable, it's very difficult to know Raila's next move. He will say this today, he'll say this tomorrow. So yesterday he gave out those comments, and media picked it up. And you know, media also blows up the news everywhere. Just a statement, and it's everywhere. So today he released a statement saying that, no, I have not endorsed Kalonzo Musyoka, but I only spoke that way because he's a man of high stature and I respect him. And they even thought that he was the A team, he was the A person for the A person, the A figure for the NADCO. You remember the first team that was there? They said those people were not maybe up to that stature of that committee. So they gave Kalonzo Musyoka. But looking at it also, some people will also analytic and say that it's a measure to keep Kalonzo Musyoka busy and keep him away from, divert him from national politics. Because sitting on that table, sitting on the National Dialogue Committee table, there could be agreements here and here. And to answer your question, it's very early to tell because politics is dynamic and keeps on changing. One day in politics can change a lot. So this is just 1 year into the elections, and we have the next elections in 2027. By 2026, trust me, we'll have seen a shift in everything. So it's too early to tell.
Yeah. Maybe I could just give you context into the only time when Raila Odinga actually endorsed someone to run for president, which was in 2002 when he said, Kibaki Tosha. A lot of people imagine that Raila Odinga did it out of his heart, that he was just magnanimous. What was happening then was there was an impending fallout they had tried to negotiate on who the flag bearer was going to be, and they had not agreed after several sittings and discussions, like we've seen that happened in 2007 and then later in 2012, 2013. So the NAC, the Rainbow Movement or coalition, was about to crumble. And during that historic moment at Uhuru Park, in his wisdom, he knew we have to make a move right now or this coalition is not going to hold, because President Moi then was making plans to pull the carpet from beneath their feet. So without consultations, because it suited him then, Raila is a very calculative politician. He went ahead and said, Kibaki Tosha. Right now, he does not have that kind of pressure. So he wouldn't mean a statement like the one that the media says he made yesterday. That,
What if-
clearly for me, I will say, was blown out of context.
What if 4 years down the line, he actually means what he said?
Judging by how history has been written in this country, I will tell you that Raila Odinga, given that he will be in good health come that time, Raila Odinga will be on the ballot. He will not endorse anyone to run while he's able to make a shot at it.
We saw Raila Odinga have Martha Karua as the running mate. But right now we see more of Raila and Kalonzo, even in many forums. Do you think maybe this is going to be the ticket come 2027 for the Azimio team? Or we are going to see a different shift of the game?
Well, you first asked him, what if he said comes true at that time that Raila backs Kalonzo Musyoka in 2027? Raila, looking at Raila Odinga's history, many people want to look at him and say, and ask themselves so many questions. Why has he not mentored politicians? But some people will say that, yeah, he has mentored some politicians to be where they are, and then at the end of the day, they betray him. They leave him alone. Look at, they were once friends with William Ruto. So many politicians have been mentored by Raila Odinga. But when it comes to, I don't know, when it comes to that place where some betray him, some will go with him to the end. Now, Raila's shoes are really big to fill. They are very big shoes to fill. And looking at if he's not going to vie for that position, then he backs someone. It would be something great to do. It would be a strategic. It would be a strategic move, and it would be a very fair competition. It would be a fair election to face the president right now, because I believe a backing by Raila Odinga would really
Change the game.
change the game. Change the game. You know, Raila has organic supporters. Raila has he has a huge following. He's influential. He's charismatic. So I would be happy if he handed the mantle to Kalonzo Musyoka. And you see, even in 2022, Kalonzo Musyoka was one of the candidates that were potential candidates for the deputy president position. But I think they wanted to play the gender factor to bring in Martha Karua. But looking at the stature of Kalonzo Musyoka, I believe he's a good fit. So we're good to go.
Let's shift gears now to the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And we've actually seen alleged fallout between the deputy and the president.
Have there been fallouts?
Alleged.
Alleged.
And we've seen actually the deputy president actually defending that there's no rift between him and the head of state.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, there was a time when we were told there was no Kieleweke and there was no Tanga Tanga. But as time went by, it all was revealed that the divisions actually existed. In the statements being made right now in the Kenya Kwanza House, we should read more into what's not been said rather than what's been said. You see, it's only the guilty who run, or the old who cringe when or complain when a talk about bonds is begun. So when you see Rigathi going on the defensive, it's because he knows the reality, which is the center is no longer holding. The influence, the support he had on the president has been waning. And this is expected in politics. Politics is dynamic, interests change. And at the moment, I believe that what Rigathi Gachagua was bringing to the fold has, in a way, waned. And so it's possible there are other players who are more influential who are eating into his stuff. So when you hear him speak out, he's trying to assert that he's still as valuable as he was, that he's still as close as he was to the president. But in reality, it's not what it used to be.
All right. Esther, the transfer of CSs, the cabinet reshuffle has actually brought about a lot of topics of discussion among the political circles, and the prime cabinet secretary being given more responsibilities. I mean, many people have actually alleged that he's actually been groomed maybe for the future. I mean, what do you have to say about that?
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the strategic move. But talking about the transfer of CSS, I think the problem began as the word go. When the president was appointing his cabinet secretary, he based more on rewarding his loyalists than looking at the competence. And well, it's accepted because in every election, there are people who support you, and lazima utarudisha huo mkono. So his selection of the problem started on his selection of the cabinet secretaries, and the public did not have confidence with the CSS. You know, that came from the public at the beginning, right? And then with time, the president himself accepted it and said, some of my cabinet secretaries are not competent. They don't even know what they're doing. I know more than you, yes? So, you know, at that point, we expected that the president would reshuffle his cabinet and maybe bring a team of new technocrats, or maybe people who are more skilled, people who will portray public confidence with the executive, with the presidency. But now he reshuffled it. So it's the same people from here to here. And of course, it's power play, because we cannot play utopian kind of politics where everything is perfect, that the technocrats are in the right positions. As I said, loyalty has to play. So maybe some people played a role somewhere. I always ask myself, Moses Kuria has to be there. You see, he's like the weapon. He has to be somewhere. So I don't think the president can wake up and say, Moses Kuria, go home, you know, because he's looking at what he wants in the future. And now, Musalia Mudavadi being given that position for the prime secretary, prime cabinet secretary, and also the minister for foreign affairs and diaspora affairs. Well, it could be that I wouldn't be surprised when come 2027 and the dynamics change and he's now somewhere, and now he looks at Ndindi Nyoro and says, Ndindi Nyoro, come and occupy this. And as you asked him about Rigathi Gachagua, I agree with him, because you see, when the president got support from Central Province, there was a tough tussle between Kithure Kindiki and Rigathi Gachagua, and it went to Rigathi Gachagua. So, but I really feel, I want to believe that most of the votes from Central, from the mountain, were brought by Ruto himself. Maybe Rigathi played a part. He played a part, but most of them came from Ruto himself. And now, as he has said, he's trying to find his relevance, because he's in that position and his relevance is wearing off. Yes? And you know, Rigathi Gachagua he says he's a truthful man. So he speaks this way, he speaks about the serikali ni ya shareholders, and the president says,
So you mean that Ruto could have won the elections without even having the support of Rigathi Gachagua?
I want to believe so. I really want to believe so. Because, you know, Ruto is a charismatic leader also. Ruto is is he the first president who has gone to Nyanza province? He has gone to Nyanza province himself, and he's trying to woo Nyanza province. And Nyanza province has been a no-go zone for other presidents because it has been a Raila zone. But Ruto has had the confidence to step there. And he, even before he chose his deputy at that time, he had the masses, he had the following, he had people at heart because of his ideologies. So I want to believe whether he chose who, Ruto got the presidency solely. He needed the support, yes, but the most of the votes were from Ruto himself. So Rigathi Gachagua played a small part in it, or maybe played a big part in it, but now getting there, he's worried that maybe my relevance is waving off. And looking at the trend, you see things tend to repeat themselves. During the previous tenure, the president, it got to a point where the president and the deputy president lost touch, yes? And now at this time, Rigathi baby is looking at, if you did that to him, then you can also do that to me. So he's looking at it and saying, wacha pia mimi nipange watu wangu hapa na hapa, so that kikiumana, plus you
He's
play
actually
safe.
calling out for Mount Kenya region leaders meeting. Yeah, so meaning maybe he's mobilizing the backyard.
And you know, in politics, you play safe. You can't just go there and sit and say, I'm comfortable. You never know what is going to happen. So you have to have a backup plan. So maybe something is cooking and we are yet to see.
All right.
Time can tell.
I mean, why do you think presidents and their deputies actually come at a point whereby things are not working?
It's all about ambition because right now Rigathi Gachagua is number 2. There's only one position he would wish to occupy, and that's the presidency. We have an election to go, and should Ruto opt for someone else, then Rigathi would obviously oppose such kind of a move because he can't step down given how our politics is set up. So in a way, if he's not managed well, he's a threat. He's a cannon that's waiting to explode. So that friction always exists, especially when those holding those offices are not there to serve the purpose for which they were elected, which is to deliver to the people.
Exactly.
This government is rode on a promise to change Kenyans' lives, but they have not done that. Their focus has been elsewhere to date. We are almost doing a year and a half, yet we cannot see the fruits of their labor as had been promised. So when things start falling apart, believe me, the casualties will be the likes
Gachagua.
of the deputy
He'll
president.
be the first casualty.
The guilty, as I say, are always afraid. I'll take you to a recent story about a cabinet secretary who was fired. His name was Mwangi Kiunjuri. First, dockets or portfolios were taken from his ministry. They were moved around, and then after that, the influence he had was watered down. And then what followed was his ejection from the cabinet by the former head of state. The rearrangement we have seen is preparing us for people who are going to exit the
To be
cabinet.
sacked.
So it's only fair that Rigathi Gachagua talks when we can still listen, because there's a time when his cry will come too late.
All right. These are all allegations. Let's wait and see if maybe it will come to the light.
Where there is smoke,
There
there
is
is
fire.
fire. And we did not start the fire. So he knows what's coming.
It's just the same way I've said when we say we were skeptical about our CSS. You see what has happened. Dalili ya mvua ni mawingu.
As they say. Now let's move on to the national dialogue. Actually, both teams have agreed on 3 main issues. That is the 2/3 gender rule, the establishment of the prime CS office and the leader of opposition, and the fidelity of political parties. What many Kenyans are asking, these talks were to enable Kenyans have a discussion on the high cost of living.
Yes.
But we have not seen any in the three main issues.
There's the third one you have mentioned, and I would like you to repeat so we can begin with that.
The fidelity of political parties.
Yes.
There's also a reconstitution of the IEBC. They've also agreed on that to increase the numbers from 7 to 9.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So about that, let's tie that to our discussion tonight. The president just the other day was doing what he says in Swahili, alikuwa anapanga opposition by imposing Kalonzo Musyoka
As their flag bearer.
Yes. That in itself is an assault on democracy because he's from a different fold. So when his actions seem or can be assumed to be undermining what others are trying to do, then we must ask, is he really defending and protecting our constitution? So the teams on the ground or doing these talks may agree, but when the principals are of a different mind, these talks are really about nothing. Which is why the most important thing, which was to come up with a way to reduce the cost of living, is no longer important. So there are those issues over which they have agreed. We know we have a government that went around saying how they would not create positions for a few individuals. Yet, right now, of the three issues, a third of them involves creating plum positions for individuals. Yet, we know even when these positions are created, they're not going to assuage the suffering of the common Kenyan. So, we are glad that we no longer have protests every week. We have calm. People have gone back to what brings bread to the table. But then these talks are really about nothing. The institutions that are constitutionally protected and created should have been allowed to handle whatever issues there are. So I would say these talks should have happened before the protests came, before the police brutalized Kenyans, before properties were destroyed. But it's a good thing. That's what politicians do. They use us, the common wananchi, as fodder for their interests to be taken care of. And they seem to be pretty well taken care of at the moment.
All right. Esther, do you think the national dialogue is actually diverted from the main agenda?
I'll start from here. I'm a student of political science, and John Locke is a theorist who gave his theory on social contract. A social contract is an agreement between the people. You are born into an archaic situation, an archaic state, lawlessness, nothing. But now, for there to be an organization, there has to be an agreement between the rulers and the ruled. So the ruled give the rulers authority, the contract to rule them, but within powers, within some power. That's why we have the legislature, and that's the kind of democracy we have in our country here. Okay, so the national dialogue is a tested and true medium of conflict resolution. It's not happening for the first time in Kenya. It is not an idea that was brought by someone in Kenya because something happened. We've had national dialogues in Tunisia. We've had national dialogues in Sudan, and the national dialogues, they tend to give a pathway of a more formalized process where there is a threat of political legitimacy. For example, in Colombia, the government had to sit with the military and come up with a national dialogue to restore democracy in the country, okay? So a national dialogue will bring out a more formalized process so that we don't go to the streets. We can use committees, we can use referendums, we can use high-level consultations. And now in Kenya, we have a committee, the National Dialogue Committee. So I wouldn't say it is it is, I wouldn't put it on the side and trash it and say it's useless and what, because you see what was happening before the National Dialogue Committee. Our democracy was being threatened. Stability was being threatened. There could be no, even if you talk about cost of living, we reported losses during the demonstrations. And for anything to thrive, for the president to work well, he needed a stable environment. And for him to get into government, he cannot overlook what anything that could happen. So he had to step up and bring up this National Dialogue Committee that has constituted of the first one failed, the bipartisan talks failed, and now we had the National Dialogue Committee. We saw both leaders of the houses, the minority and the majority, agreeing for the first time in Parliament that let us constitute this. And it's even backed by Parliament, because now they have to ask for, they have, I think they have 15 days to complete their work, but they have to go to Parliament to ask for an extension of 30 days for them to complete their work. And so it's being backed by Parliament. So it's a formalized process of cooling down things, as it should be. I wouldn't say this is political. Now, about the issues that are entrenched in the National Dialogue Committee, cost of living was part of that, yes, because cost of living will affect every other thing. It will affect the politics, it will affect every other thing. And we've had other, what is your question again? I've gone and lost it. But I would say the issues in the National Dialogue Committee, they're supposed to provide a pathway for a pathway or a way forward for what happens in Kenya after every 5 elections, after every 5 years after elections, okay?
Because actually the main aim was the high cost of living, to address that.
No, the main aim was not high cost of living. Kenya Kwanza came up
to protest in the streets. They were actually complaining of the high cost of living.
Yes, Kenya, you know, it was just the demonstrations were, because you remember when they started, they had the audit of the 2022 elections. Yeah. Reconstitution of the IEBC. They had so many things, but they agreed.
The goalposts kept shifting.
It kept shifting, but now they finally
did not have a clear goal when they began doing this. Number one, when they initiated, they were not sure that Kenyans would follow through. But then, after they called Kamukunji 1, Kenyans showed up. But Kenyans wanted them to address the high cost of living. So, as they kept shifting the goalposts, we find ourselves here today where the driving force, that which took Kenyans to the streets, is no longer on the table. No. It's now just a by the way.
Now let me finish what I was saying. The goalposts kept on changing, but for it to go to Parliament and be backed by the Azimio coalition, you remember Azimio had its points, and Kenya Kwanza came up with its points, and the points were cost of living, all right, and social economic issues, 2/3 gender rule, national unity and governance, check and balances in government, electoral justice, entrenchment of CDF, NGAF, Senate oversight, entrenchment of the leader of opposition, entrenchment of the prime CS. Yeah. So each side came up with their points to come and negotiate to see what you're going to agree on. And remember, there are also other stakeholders who were invited to give their views in the National Dialogue Committee. There were the traditional actors, there were investors, there were business people.
But Kenyans are actually protesting the high cost of living.
Yes.
And that's why they actually initiated the dialogue, to be able to calm the protests. And so Kenyans are wondering, why did you leave the high cost of living from these discussions?
But how would you protest about high cost of living in the streets? And you saw what was happening in the streets.
But that was the reason Kenyans went to the streets, so that the government puts in place measures that will reduce the cost of living.
You know, you've seen people like Eric Omondi protesting about cost of living, and they were being arrested. But now, we had to have a more formalized process of protesting.
In that formalized process, the main agenda should have remained. Item number 1 should have been cost of living. You see, just a few days ago, the cost of fuel went up. As these talks are going on, is that an indication that these talks do not hold any sway?
And now, if you remember, the Kenya Kwanza side were adamant about including cost of living in the talks. You remember that? Because they said you cannot discuss cost of living on a round table. You talk about the cost of fuel. There are so many factors that are leading to the high cost of fuel, which it's practical because you see the war in Russia and Ukraine has led to the demand of oil and the demand of oil from the OPEC countries. And we are at the mercy of the OPEC countries. We do not produce our own fuel. So when you want...
I beg to differ with you. We are past the point where we can be nice about what's happening globally. We know the measures that the Kenya Kwanza government has instituted have burdened Kenyans more than any other government has. Whatever is happening in other countries is being addressed given the circumstances of those countries. But in our country, we have seen heavier taxation. We have seen a government go on as they spend as if we are a very rich nation.
Yeah,
like right now, our president is away. He says that an entourage of those traveling abroad should not be more than 3. Yet when you look at the people who are accompanying him,
It's actually doing the opposite.
yes, you look at what the Nairobi governor did the other day, and it flies against whatever they are saying. So let's just face it, these talks are not about addressing what's affecting the common mwananchi.
But they are
These talks
coming
are-
down the situation that we have in the country.
And the situation we had was brought about by these two protagonists who have a monopoly of violence. One that is legally given to them by dint of them being head of state, and the other one by the influence he has on the people. Cost of living.
All right, as you
That
conclude, because
remains
time is
the
not
main
on our side.
agenda. And as long as it's not been addressed, as long as every other day the cost of living will keep increasing, these talks are not
All
helping
right.
anyone.
Well,
As-
you're
as
not
we-
giving
as
us
we-
the time.
as
I
we
really
conclude-
disagree. I strongly disagree.
I mean, it's all right to agree to disagree on the matters. And as you conclude, I mean, what can you say is the state of our politics in just one word?
I will go back. The state of our politics right now. You saw what was the president went in and said, "I am going to lower the prices of So I'm going to lower the cost of living," and that did not happen. And there were demonstrations. There was mayhem. There was a situation that we wouldn't want to know where we were if we did not have these talks. Because I always say, if we did not have these talks, if we did not calm down that situation. And remember, I said a national dialogue committee is a form of conflict resolution. So if we used that tool to get to some stability, because at where we were bad.
So how can you describe the state of our politics in just one word? My director is shouting on my ears. I need to end the conversation.
Let's give the NADCO time. It has been given teeth to formulate things that I feel will help us move forward.
All
like
right.
at least agreeing on seeing these two people who could not face each other sit somewhere and agree gives me a sign of hope.
All right,
So
a sign of hope.
It's hopeful. We are
All right.
hopeful.
Muthiora, as you conclude,
We are in a lull, political lull, where we don't have a lot of activity. That's how come topics such as endorsing a presidential candidate 4 years before the election seem to be spicy. This lull is causing people like Rigathi Gachagua to sit on edge. But soon things are going to pick up, and then that's when the rubber will hit the road and
All right.
things will come to the fore. People are planning. It's not about service delivery. It's about winning the 2027 election. IEBC needs to be reconstituted properly. Our law provides for how that should happen. I wish we did not step back to these talks we are having right now, because this is including a few individuals and excluding all the others.
All right, I
Well,
guess.
if you gave me more time, I would talk about cost of living and price of fuel.
Yeah,
But
I
now
guess
you
next
put
time
me
we'll have
short.
we'll have that conversation in our next discussion. I'll be pleased to invite you again, and
All
of
right.
course Muthiora Karriara, as we discuss on these matters of national importance. That has been Muthiora Karriara, the party leader of TGN, and of course our political analyst Esther Nyonje. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much to our viewers for watching the Dialogue KE. On behalf of the whole team that made this broadcast a success, have yourself a blessed night. My name is Kennedy Kimani, and Boniface Murithi has been my co-presenter on the sign language interpretation.